Hey everyone, welcome back to Golden Key Design. On today's episode, we'll be taking this bathroom from this mess to this beautifully designed space. Stay tuned to see how we did it. Let's take a look one more time at that before state of the bathroom. As you can see, it's very dirty. This is what the grout currently looks like, so we're gonna have to adjust that. The light fixture doesn't fully work, and the sink is a mess, and the vanity is kind of falling apart. So let's get to work. So the first thing you're going to want to do is turn off the water to your toilet and then give it a flush to clear out that tank. And then you can use a sponge to get any of the excess water still left in that tank back there. Then when that's complete, you can use the same sponge to empty out the basin of the toilet and make sure there's no water left in there. And as you can see, we got pretty much every last drop. I decided to take off the tank first before removing the entire toilet just to make it a bit lighter. So you can just remove a couple screws on the back of the toilet and then just pop it right off. Then in order to remove the rest of the toilet, there's an anchor bolt on either side, which you can just pop off those caps and then use some pliers just to take off that nut. And then there's a wax ring on the bottom, so it's going to be a little bit tricky to pop off at first, but just kind of leverage it out of there and you'll be able to pop it right off. This is definitely one of the more nasty undersides of toilet. Sometimes they're a little bit cleaner, but unfortunately this one was a bit dirty, so I took off the rest of the remaining wax ring and kind of cleaned it up as best as I could for the time being, and then popped a little rag in there to block all the sewer gases. Next up was the sink, and here you're going to want to turn on the sink, and then from the bottom underside you're going to turn off the water where the valves are, and unfortunately I just realized that after I fully shut off the valve, water was still running. Not good. So I had to shut off the entire water to the whole place to address that. So once the water main was shut off to the entire apartment, I was able to fully remove the sink. It was quite heavy, but it came out relatively easily. So here are those water lines that connected to the underside of the sink, and I did my best to remove them, but unfortunately I couldn't remove both, and I ended up having to cut some of these lines. Then it was onto the P-trap, and just pulled that one out.
Really went in there. My God, Jesus. We should be able to pull this thing out now.
Vanities are usually just screwed into the wall, so I just removed a couple screws and was able to just pull it out. As I mentioned earlier, I couldn't get off those valves, so I had to just cut the copper behind the valve, so I had two fresh pipes to work with, and I came back and sanded them down, as I'll use a shark bite connector to attach new valves, and it needs to have a nice clean surface to mount to.
Alright, so I bought this. This is a quarter turn, so it just turns 90 degrees instead of the ones that turn like this. So these are known to be better, apparently. And then this is a 1/2 inch to a 3/8 inch connection. And these are called shark bites, which means you can just slide it on, no soldering or no screwing any nuts. It's the first time I've used them, so hopefully it works.
This was a bit tricky at first, as I didn't realize how hard you needed to press to fit these connectors onto the pipe, but I eventually got it.
And they're both in the off position. I'm gonna go turn the water back on and pray. You guys let me know if the water starts coming out, okay? Water is on. I kind of feel like opening up one of these just briefly to make sure it works. Okay, yeah, it works.
After cleaning up that water, I removed the little baseboard that was left behind, and then it was on to prepping for paint. First, I removed both of the outlet covers from the GFCI outlet, and then I removed the cover for the light switch as well. And then I went on to removing the trim for the door, as I'll be replacing that as well. So this is a primer. You want to make sure you always mix your paint or primer before using it, even if you recently bought it from the store. And I'm just putting on about 2 coats on all the walls, and I know that they're already a white color, but I learned no matter what color the walls are, it's always just best to prime. So here I'm just going around and cutting in around all the edges first with my paintbrush, and then I'll come back and roll everything. And if you're enjoying the content so far, I'd really appreciate it if you could give the video a like and even subscribe, as we got a ton of DIY content on our channel and more to come every Saturday.
Alright, hey guys, so I just got back from a run, but now it is time to finally start adding some pops of color. We are going to be painting this whole section here a nice green color, as well as the wall right here, so just these two. And I think, although you won't walk in and see it directly, you'll look at the mirror and see it on the back side, so it's kind of as if it's on both of these walls. You don't want to add too much color because you don't want to make the room feel cramped and small without any windows or anything, so I'm trying to keep it as bright and white as possible, but still want to add a little bit of color. So I think these two walls will be nice, a nice touch. Everything else has been primed at least once, and then had 2 coats of a bright white applied with a pearl finish, which is basically a high gloss, which is good for a bathroom since there's going to be a lot of moisture. So let's get to it.
So for those that are curious, this is Jade Dragon by Sherwin-Williams. We used this on one of our previous accent walls, and if you want to check out that video, I'll link it in the top right corner. But really like this color, it's a really nice shade of green. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please check out our TikTok and Instagram, as we got even more DIY content over there, as well as more real-time updates of our renovations. So while that paint was drying, I decided to change out the switches, and I put in 2 rocker switches, one for the fan and one for the light, and I prefer these a lot more than the previous switches, as I think they look a lot more modern.
Nice.
I also switched out the GFCI outlet for one that was all white without any color, and I think again this just looks a lot cleaner and modern.
So clean. Alright, let's go flip the breaker and see if it worked. Okay, I just flipped it, and you'll notice that the green light is not on. Shoot. However, with GFCI outlets, you need to hit the reset button before it'll turn on. There it is. It might be hard to see, but it just went green. And just to verify, I have a light here. This should turn on when I plug it in. Sweet. And sweet. And see how like sturdy this is? When you plug something in, it doesn't move. The other one was like wobbling around, and it's so annoying when you have to plug in something like a hairdryer and it's like wobbling. So nice and sturdy.
Then it was on to the floors. I thought this was in relatively good condition other than it being really dirty, so first I took some Crud Cutter to clean it up, and here I'm using a special floor paint by Rust-Oleum that you can just paint directly over your tile to give it new life. And so I thought this was best rather than breaking all this tile and putting in all new tile, trying to save a little money here. So I just used my paintbrush to get in the grout lines and then a roller to kind of get the main surface of those tiles. And I put on 2 coats of white and then 2 coats of a top coat kind of clear finish to give it some protection. Then once the tile was complete, I was able to finally install this transition between the vinyl plank flooring and the tile. And if you want to see how I installed all this vinyl plank, I have a video on that as well. You can click in the upper right hand corner to check that out. But here I'm just installing the 2 boards here. You can't really do one in order to fit it underneath the door casing. And then normally you install this metal strip directly into the floor. However, it's a lot easier if you install it directly to the T-molding, and here I'm just using a rubber mallet to do that. And then once that was in place, I used some special adhesive glue that's meant for concrete, and I just put that down into the seam here and then laid the T-molding right on top. I then installed the trim around the door, and this is the same trim I have throughout the place, so I had some left over to use here. I then installed some new handles on the Vanity. I bought these off Amazon because the ones that came with it just weren't that good. However, this is a great Vanity, and here's those old ones. It just doesn't fit the aesthetic that I'm going for. Really happy with the Vanity, and I just wanted to permanently install it by just adding some screws into the studs in the wall. And here's a nice stud finder. It's actually magnetic, so it just attaches itself to one of the screws used to mount the drywall, and I like this one a lot better than other stud finders. Super easy to use. And this Vanity came with a sink countertop combo, and so here I'm just pre-installing the faucet. It's just a lot easier to do this now rather than later. So you just add some kind of gussets and then some washers to get it in place. And then here I'm just checking to make sure it's perfectly centered and aligned, because I'm not going to be able to move it once this is in. I then also pre-installed the water lines, because again, this is going to be way too difficult to do once this countertop is installed. So here I'm just using a wrench to tighten them down. Don't go too hard, but this is a 1/2 inch to 3/8 connection. I then added a bead of silicone all the way around the Vanity to secure the top. This is definitely a bit cumbersome to carry, but I made sure not to pre-install the drain, so I had kind of a hole there to grab onto when I lowered the sink in. And it was at this point I realized with those water lines I was not going to be able to properly fit the sink in, so after adjusting those, everything went pretty smoothly here. I then gave it a couple shoves into the corner to make sure it was properly seated, and then it was fully installed. Just kind of have to let that silicone dry and then you're good to go. I then installed the P-trap. First, I'm sliding it into that drain in the wall, and you can buy this kit at any Home Depot. It's super easy to do. And then I have an extender piece here to connect the drain to the P-trap that I cut to size, and then added a fitting onto it, and then it was finally time to check to see if the water worked. I then cut all of the baseboards and shoe molding to size, and then had a little painting session out here in my living room. And I find it a lot easier to pre-paint your baseboards and trim, as it's a lot easier to do now rather than once it's installed. Then it was time to silicone the edges of the sink, which prevents water from kind of going down into those cracks and causing problems. So first you want to tape it out. Silicone is pretty difficult to work with, so it just becomes a lot easier with the cleanup if you have tape in place. So I put a bead of silicone in both edges and then ran a finger across it to get it nice and smooth, and then you can pull the tape off and you're good to go. And by then the paint had dried, so it was time to install all the baseboards. I used liquid nails as well as some brad nails here. I also recaulked the seam from the tile to the shower, here using the same technique as before with the silicone.
Oh, literally.
Then it was finally time to install the new toilet. Here you're going to want to install a new wax ring on the underside of the toilet and then kind of use your weight to smush it and push it into place. Then you can install the anchor bolts on either side. Again, this will kind of tighten down that wax ring, and then just make sure it's level. After that, you can install the tank. Just follow the instructions that come with your specific toilet. Had to give it a test. Luckily no leaks. And here's that soft close lid in place, which I really like. So here's where we're at right now. I think the place is really coming along and we're in that final stretch, but I want to make that mirror a little bit nicer as well as switch out the light fixture. So let's get to it.
It's about center. So I'm just gonna paint that real quick, and then install this, probably with some drywall anchors if I can't find a stud. Then we should be good to go.
There ended up being a stud on the left there that I could screw into, but had to use a drywall anchor on the right. But this was plenty strong, and I just used a level there to make sure the two mounting screws were perfectly level. I then installed the light, and each light you install is completely different, but it's usually relatively the same process. You have two screws protruding from the wall, and you kind of screw these nuts onto the end. Then I was able to install the light bulbs and test the light to see if it worked. It's the best feeling when your light actually turns on. But now we're on to the mirror, and I decided to frame it out with some 1x3s. This is a relatively easy process, but first I'm just going to give them some nice stain and then add some polyurethane, and I believe it was Early American Stain by Minwax. And while that's drying, I installed 2 towel hooks right outside the shower, and these match the handles on the vanity, so everything stays cohesive. And by that time, the stain and polyurethane had fully dried, so I was able to install the boards for the mirror. And the first one was a bit tricky, but I used some tape to hold it in place. And then once that was fully secured, the sides and top went on relatively easily. So now let's take a look back at what the bathroom used to look like. There were manila colored walls, not really any design features, a grout that was extremely dirty, a vanity that needed to be replaced, as well as a toilet. And this is what the bathroom looks like today. Really proud of this renovation. I think it turned out awesome. I'm really happy with the colors, but it also looks really clean and not too colorful at the same time. If you have any questions about the process, please leave them in the comments below and I'd be happy to answer them. And this was the last project in the place right before I got it rented, so I think this kind of sealed the deal. And next week we'll do a full before and after of the entire place, so stay tuned. And as always, thanks for watching and happy building. See you next time.